Hello, everyone. Emin's here with us. He's the founder of AVA Labs. He's joining from all the way from New York, and it's very early morning for him. So really appreciate the time you taking out, Emin. And he'll be speaking on open and programmable finance with Ava. Stage is yours, Emin.
I will. Thank you so much for having me here, and hello to everybody in India. And I just want to say hello to everyone. I've been to Bangalore, I've been to Chennai, and I've been worried about the virus situation back in India. But I'm so relieved that it did not turn out to be as bad as I feared. My own country was also spared a little bit so far, so I'm also super happy. And overall, I want to take you on a small journey away from all this virus quarantine stuff and talk about talk about cash and talk about digital cash and what it means for us. So very quickly. So when I talk about money, when I think about money, especially in India or also where I grew up in Turkey, there is this culture of certain things having value. So every time I look at this picture, I see solid gold. I think, wow, that must have cost a lot of money to collect. It must have cost a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort to put together. But why do I think that? This is not the shiniest metal. This is not the prettiest metal. It's not the most scarce metal. It's just that I've been conditioned to think this. And if I look at other cultures, that's around the globe, for some Pacific Islanders, this evokes the same feeling. There's somebody looks at this and says, "Wow, that's very valuable. It would have taken hours and hours to collect all of these coins." And in a similar way, somebody from the ancient Chinese dynasties would look at knives, which they used for money, and say, "Whoa, that requires special expertise. There are only so many knives in the world." So, some of you might know that prior to founding AVA Labs, I still am a professor at Cornell University. And I worked on cryptocurrencies long before Bitcoin appeared on the scene. I built the world's first proof of work minted currency called Karma. And so it's kind of interesting how these currencies work, and it's kind of interesting why they have value and how they get that. One interesting story that I want to very briefly tell you before I transition into AVA is the story that takes place on a Pacific island, on the island of Yap, where they use these giant stones for money, the way we use our own currency for money. The reason why they use these giant stones is because this particular island is a coral island, and they have no big stones on this island. You have to go to the island over, pick up, carve out a giant stone with a hole in it, carry it, and so forth. And then you can say, well, look, I'm the kind of person who can organize one of these trips, get out one of these, build one of these coins, and then I can show off exactly how rich I am. And then once I have the coin, what do I do on this island? Well, they do exactly what we all do. They display their wealth. So if you see this fellow showing off his 2 coins, I think there's a couple of pictures. Other pictures, this guy's even richer. He's got 5 coins, and you can see the coins are not exactly minted to the same standard, but it doesn't matter for their purposes. And so this is a very interesting sort of historical episode, and there's a very well-documented case of a British anthropologist who was living among them in 1863 when a very interesting thing happened. So a group of men went to the next island over, the one that's volcanic with the big stones, and they carved out a giant stone. And they were bringing it back, and any of you who've been on a canoe knows just how tipsy those things are. On the way back, something terrible happened. Their canoe went overboard, the coin went into the ocean, and now our people, our heroes, they came back to their island. They're all wet, they're all miserable, and they've got a problem. Now, what's the problem? Their coin is at the bottom of the ocean. So they go to the village, and there is a big discussion on the island about whether or not that coin counts. And at the end of the day, they decide to count that coin. They say, well, look, you know what we're going to do from this day on? You know how you used to be able to give like 4 of your coins to Anupam and buy his land? From now on, you can give 3 of your coins, and we will track who owns the coin at the bottom of the ocean. You can say something like, hey, Anupam, here's 3 of my coins, plus everybody, he now owns the coin in the drink. And from that day on, these people have actually had that coin in circulation. Now, I heard this story first. I thought this is clearly a made-up story. It's not. Somebody went and found that coin. Here it is. It's at the bottom of the ocean, and the coin is in circulation. So this is really interesting, and it gets to the core of how these systems are built. And at the core of this system, as you can understand from the simple example on the island of Yap, lies a consensus protocol. If everybody on the island can track exactly who owns the coin, then this is a pretty straightforward task. It's we just say, okay, it used to be Emin's coin, and now it's Anupam's coin, and he gives it to Alice, Bob, Charlie, whoever, and as long as we can trace this, then there's absolutely no problem. But if we cannot trace it, if we cannot all agree on who has the coin at the bottom of the ocean, the coin we cannot see, then there is a huge problem. This system will fall apart. So I want to now pick it up from there, and this is at the heart of every cryptocurrency. And I want to give you a very brief, not very technical, but very brief, somewhat technical glimpse into the background of every cryptocurrency and where we are and what happened. About 10 and a half years ago, a pseudonymous person or entity calling themselves Satoshi came up with a new coin called Bitcoin. And the world has not been the same. So you can see, and I'd hate to show price graphs. It doesn't matter what the price is. But if I look around, I see a lot of excitement about cryptocurrencies. You cannot walk in downtown Manhattan without overhearing bankers talk about what their blockchain strategy is. And there are lots and lots of big companies going in. Libra, Facebook are going in. By the way, Libra is using for its own consensus protocol the world's best old school consensus protocol. And that protocol was designed with a lead author called Ted Maofan Yin. And Ted is my PhD student. I sent him to Silicon Valley for the summer. He came back and he said, oh yeah, I did some cool stuff, but this is all old stuff. And I want to go back and work on Avalanche. But I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but you're seeing where I want this discussion to go. So there's a lot of excitement in the world around these currencies. Every central banker has suddenly got a bee in their bonnet. They are very worried that China is issuing their digital blockchain currency, and they are not. So I'm talking to a fairly large number of central bankers. We were before. My group was previously talking to central bankers before, but their interest has definitely been piqued. And I've also been following the regulatory environment in India, the bans, the unbans, the bans again, and so forth. And we are with you. And in the long term, this technology is unbannable. And one of the smartest things we did as academics in the US was convince our politicians that they cannot win the fight to ban it. And therefore, they must look into other techniques for enforcing and achieving their policy aims. So let's go back to where we are. So we've been around for some time. Bitcoin's been around. There are maybe at least 2,000, perhaps 3,000 different coins. All of these coins look the same. There will be many different people trying to pitch a coin to you probably, and they are all undifferentiated. They all converge towards the same thing. So this is a strange situation, and I'll tell you exactly why this is happening. And this converged reality, no matter which coin you look at, open up coinmarketcap.com, look at any of those coins, all of them suffer from three big problems. One, they cannot scale. Bitcoin cannot scale, Ethereum cannot scale, none of the other coins can scale. And they cannot scale because these first generation platforms fundamentally use a consensus protocol that is not ready to support the kinds of populations we'd like to branch out to. If Venezuela, we leave alone India is way too big. If Venezuela were to switch to Bitcoin, every adult, and they were to use the main chain, every adult would get to go to the store once every 36 days. Now, that's just Venezuela, and India is maybe tenfold bigger than that, if not more. These things are not usable. They offer the same lowest common denominator service. They all look like each other. Why would you use Litecoin versus Bitcoin versus this versus that? The differences between them are very, very small indeed. And none of them have governance. They need to evolve with the changing needs of users, and they can't and they don't. And so we're stuck in a reality where we have these rigid platforms that cannot change. And the fact that they cannot change because it's so fundamental to them has become part of the identity of their proponents. These people are really now proud of the fact that their protocol is unevolvable. Let me now take you back. Let me give you a very glimpse of where we are from a technical perspective. Like my area of distributed systems has been around for 45 years. We've known about consensus for about 45 years. We've had many hundreds of solutions to the consensus problem, known as voting. And the people who came up with it, both Barbara Liskov and Leslie Lamport, shown in this picture, are brilliant, and they have Turing Awards. And there are maybe hundreds to thousands of protocols that academics know about, mostly done in the 90s, 80s, 90s, early noughts. When Satoshi came along in 2009, and this is not the real Satoshi, this is the funny Satoshi. When Satoshi came along in 2009, he knew about all this stuff. And he said, look, this stuff is all fragile. It doesn't work in open finance. I cannot take one of these old protocols and create a system that is open to all. And then he invented his mining-based solution. Now, his mining-based solution is brilliant in many ways, but by now we are seeing its problems. There are only 19 mining pools in Bitcoin. To have a meaningful voice in Bitcoin, you have to have enormous amounts of electricity, access to electricity and rigs. So, and these things cannot scale there. It's a synchronous protocol. It's a slow protocol. It can only do on-chain about 3 to 7 transactions per second. The people who work on it have given up, and they're trying to add scale at different layers, and that process is not going so well. The Lightning Network, as I predicted and many others predicted, is lagging behind in adoption and will always lag behind in adoption compared to systems that can support these things on the chain level. In 2018, something fantastic happened, a big, big thing that I didn't think I would see in my lifetime. Another team, calling themselves Team Rocket, came up with a paper that combines the best of the previous sets of consensus protocols. This new protocol is called Avalanche, and it's robust like Nakamoto. It's robust like Bitcoin, but it's also quiescent. It's also green and sustainable. There's no mining in it, like these other older protocols. And it's fast to finality like these other classical protocols. So once again, just to be very, very quick, these Nakamoto protocols, they're fine. They work okay. They're very robust. They're unkillable, but they are mostly not decentralized. There's a lot of centralization. Hash power is controlled by a small number of entities, and they leak a lot of value. About $5 billion per year is leaving Bitcoin to miners and power companies, and that's a big problem. Now, what's happening is you're seeing everybody and their brother trying to invent a new protocol. Now, that's hard. So what they do is they go back in literature to things we understand, to things that Satoshi understood and discarded, and they're now trying to resurrect these old protocols under new names. There are Hashgraph and so on and so forth. These are all revisitations of old protocols from 1990s, and they just have some blockchain lipstick on, and people are trying to make them appear as if they're brand new. All of these protocols are slow by nature. None of them scale. If I go to proof of scale, if I look at what my student did, he did the best protocol, classical protocol that was adopted for Libra. It accommodates 100 participants. We are not here to break down the financial system, to institute another financial system with just 100 players. We're here to blow it up and to open it to all. And these protocols fundamentally are unsuited. If Ethereum 2.0 were to succeed, it would still be a classical protocol with about 60-something validators per shard. Those numbers are tiny. They lead to cabal formation. And I'm not going to work really hard to break down one system only to institute an even smaller, more closed system. So the main thing that I want to leave you with is that there exists a new protocol called Avalanche, That is far better than all of the ones in existence. And there's only one coin that embodies it right now called AVA, and it's not in circulation yet. You cannot buy it, but it's coming. In a few months, we'll be going mainnet, and I encourage you to check it out. It's very different from everybody. It's robust like Nakamoto. It has low latency. Transactions finalize in 1 second. It has high throughput. In the lab, we've seen numbers as high as 19,000 TPS. But in actual deployment, we're seeing 6,500 transactions per second. That's with 2,000 geo-distributed nodes. So you, from India, can participate. You do not need a mining rig. You do not need a giant cable. You do not need to be in bed with the power company. These protocols are lightweight. You do not need a hefty machine. They consume very low amounts of energy. If parameterized properly, they can withstand greater than 51% adversaries. Avalanche is the only protocol to be able to do this. And it scales like no other. So they work differently. Every other protocol, classical protocols require all-to-all communication. And Avalanche does not. It has a different communication pattern and a different method of action. It uses metastability at its root. And it can achieve consensus in a very, very small number of rounds in a very large network, which in turn means things like in under 1 second finality. Now, when I say under 1 second, on our current testnet, we're achieving 90 milliseconds. Now, that's probably not sustainable, but it is at least possible. We know that we're under promising and over delivering, as is our style. Now, these are latencies. Avalanche achieves 1 second latencies. Ethereum achieves a latency of about 500 seconds. Bitcoin requires an hour for 6 confirmations. So that 1 second in Avalanche is final, immutable. Okay, it's comparable to, it's actually stronger guarantees than Bitcoin's 1 hour. The throughput is immensely high, and as I said, it's a scalable protocol. The security of the protocol is configurable. We can tolerate a large fraction of Byzantine participants, and there is no sudden death. Every protocol you hear about, ETH2O, EOS, etc., all of these protocols, if the number of attackers is over a certain threshold, the attacker is guaranteed to win. That is not the case for Avalanche, and that is not the case for AVA. When the attacker is bigger than what you provisioned for, what happens is your guarantee goes out the door. So our guarantee of no safety violations for the next 20,000 years might go out the door, sure, but it will be replaced by, okay, well, there might be a safety violation in the next 5,000 years. So that's a perfectly fine guarantee, and it's a very robust protocol at its core. But this is not the only thing that makes AVA unique. One of the most exciting things about AVA is not only that it innovates at the technical level, at the most important level of the consensus protocol, but also at the model level. It can do things that nobody can even express with Ethereum. It can do things that nobody can even think about attacking with Bitcoin. Now, what are those things? The main thing we want to do with AVA is allow people the ability to issue different assets where they control the full lifetime and every aspect of the asset. What does that mean? If I look at everyone else, they have one coin, one virtual machine that defines how the coin behaves, and one network that implements that coin. So Ethereum, you've got Ethereum, the coin, EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine, and then you've got the Ethereum network. In AVA, we also have AVA the coin, the AVA virtual machine, and the AVA network. But it's possible for anybody to issue any currency on top and define their own VM, and most importantly, also control who gets to be a validator in their system. So you can say things like, to be a validator, I'm going to create a new coin with its own behavior. It's going to, let's say, capture fractionalized real estate in the super hot market of Bangalore, let's say. And you want to sell it to outsiders. Why not sell this real estate? I'm not going to buy an actual flat in Bangalore. That's crazy. It requires me to visit, it requires me to look at the flat and so forth. But I am happy getting into and out of positions in India for fractionalized real estate. But you, who's issuing this coin, will want to control exactly what it does and what's behind it. You cannot do this with Ethereum. Once your contract is written, it's out of your hands. But you can with AVA. You can say, here's my virtual machine. It's specific to real estate. I can merge parcels, etc. And also, all of my validators are, and then you get to say what you want from your validators. They provide archival for my data. They provide privacy for my data. They provide additional resources not found on the main network. They have all signed an agreement with me. They're all located in India. They're all located outside of India, and so on and so forth. Whatever jurisdictional, legal, etc. requirements you might have, you can express them. This allows us to bridge the gap between permission deployments and permissionless deployments. So we envision a world with thousands and thousands of different coins. Anyone can create them. Many different scripting languages depending on the asset class, and many different platforms that coexist. We call these coins that are issued on their own network subnetworks. And AVA bridges the gap between them the same way the TCP/IP protocol bridges the gap between them. We also offer governance on AVA, and I'm about to wrap up after this. The operation of our consensus protocol, which I did not have time to go into, is very different from other people's. And in essence, you are polling the crowd to see what they are going to go with, what they're willing to agree to. And that repeated polling process lends itself to asking the crowd questions about how the coin can be or should be governed. So whereas Bitcoin had to bake into its operation its emissions curve for all time, on Monday, for example, there's going to be an event in Bitcoin called the halvening. That event was built into the code about 10 and a half years ago by the creator Satoshi. So he sometimes got it right. Oftentimes he minted okay number of coins. Sometimes he undermints and then the coin price goes up, but often he overmints. And now maybe some of you will not believe me, but look at Zcash. Zcash is using the same emissions curve, and they're definitely overminting. Ethereum 1.0 is definitely overminting. They're printing more coins than they're buying in terms of security, more coins than they need to for security. And that's a problem, and yet they cannot easily change this. In Avalanche, if you are an AVA coin holder, you get to vote on some of the most critical parameters in the system. Things like the minting rate, things like minimum stake, things like the minimum staking period. The number of AVA tokens to ever be issued is fixed. It is not going to change. It's very similar to Bitcoin in that sense. But the rate with which they're issued, the current minting rate for this year and next year and so on, can be changed. We can mint a little faster this year if we agree to mint a little slower next year. And one can make these adjustments based on the AVA token holders' current assessment of the economic situation. If we're competing with external assets, we should mint a little faster. If we are not, then we should mint a little slower, and so on. So this takes us to a very interesting point, which is, where are we in this process? Well, we're at a point where we saw the early entrants. We saw Bitcoin, and it's competing with the dollar. And I wish it much luck. It's a system I happen to love, and I want it to win, but it's a hard battle. We saw Ethereum come up with a revolutionary idea. They took everything from Bitcoin, they added Turing-complete scripting language. That's the only change in Ethereum. And that's fantastic. It's a great experimentation platform, but they missed a couple of very important design issues that AVA gets right, which is you have to target not being a computer, not fighting it out with the dollar, but becoming a platform for other people to issue any kind of asset on top. A platform that gives the asset issuer control over every aspect of the protocol and network. And I'm proud to say that AVA is the only one that does this. And it's also the only one with the fastest consensus protocol, the biggest breakthrough in distributed systems in at least 10 years following Satoshi's discovery, probably the biggest one in terms of consensus protocols. Scale and performance, usability, interoperability, flexibility, and governance, these are all critical issues. And we keep seeing everybody else copy Satoshi's original design with small tweaks. That will not get us anywhere other than make those founders rich. What we're doing in AVA is create a new platform that's usable by all for everybody else to build their own coins on and to use to create a fantastic new platform that can change the financial world. And crypto is far from over. It's very, very early. We're seeing the limits of first generation platforms now, and we will be a big disruptor for incumbents. We will create many, many opportunities for startups in the space if we build the right foundations now. So Ava the coin is a very interesting platform from a technical perspective. So I encourage all of you who are developers to take a close look at it. I encourage all of you who want to issue your own coin to take a look at it as well. We made it as non-technical as possible. There's no technical expertise required to issue a coin. You can issue your own coins in the next 5 minutes if you so choose. We are currently in testnet. Our testnet is operational, and feel free to take a look. It's by far the fastest and most versatile system out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Amin. Thanks a lot. There's some questions, a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Sure, very
Can you
happy to.
please shut the screen share?
I need to shut the screen share. Let me try this. How about this?
All right, perfect. So Vandana wants to ask, what's your opinion on layer 2 solution, and why do you think we can't use it?
Layer 2 solutions are fantastic. I worked on the world's fastest layer 2 solution called T-Chan, and we demonstrated that at layer 2, I can send money from London to New York at 125,000 transactions per second on our layer 2. Now, layer 2 changes the model, and it builds a different network on top. The capacity of that network is necessarily limited by the relationships that people have. If Anupam and I are connected, fantastic. Now I have a channel to India, and I have access to his network. Very much like Hawala networks, actually, that we used to have. I don't know if people remember those, but they were a thing back in the 90s and early noughts. So they're great, but like Hawala networks, you need to know how to connect to them. Like Hawala networks, the maximum amount of money that you can send to anyone is limited. There's going to be a graph on top of the homogeneous, unified underlying system. And that graph determines, the bottlenecks in that graph determine how much money you can send. And so if my connection to Anupam is limited, then my connection to everybody in his social network is also limited. So, but you don't have to take there's also a privacy issue. These networks always leak out one, relationships between people. The fact that I know Anupam is leaked. When I use my channel and I deplete my channel, other people can see that the capacity has gone down. And if people monitor this, they will know when I'm sending money to Anupam or to his network behind his portion of the graph. So there are many other issues like this that I've outlined over the years about layer 2. So even though I've built the world's fastest layer 2 network, I decided not to work on these. I like systems that work for everyone. I like homogeneous systems that make a simple promise and stand by it. These credit networks, these layer 2 networks, Hawala style networks, they don't work well. They're not easy to use. They have inherent limitations that will forever be with them. We're beginning to see the privacy issues explored by academics even as I speak. And there will be many more of these problems to come at layer 2. So if a network can do at layer 1 what other people are hoping to do in 10 years at layer 2, then I think you should jump on to that one because it's so much easier to use. You don't need any prior setup. You don't need any connections.
Yeah. We'll just take one question from the audience. Um, yeah.
Hi. Hi,
Hi.
Emin. It's a fanboy moment. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Anupam, for pulling with this Herculean task. So my question for you, Emin, is this: you briefly mentioned about the Ethereum scalability, which it is coming with the, let's say, the validator architecture. Why do you think like it will have like this the collusion can still happen? 32 Ethereum is okay as an entry barrier, so that common people can actually come up and start validating on that. I would like to quickly take your opinion on that. Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Vikas. So here's what I think about Ethereum 2 and sharding in general and their approach to consensus in general. So what they're doing for their consensus protocol is a standard signature accrual scheme. It's exactly like EOS. So you have a small set of validators, and if enough of them sign off on a transaction, that transaction becomes final. So the network is essentially collecting signatures on behalf of different transactions proposed by different block producers, and if you have enough, then you move on.
Mhm.
So this seems like an okay idea. So Ethereum has been competing against EOS, and they turned into their mortal enemy. This is a very, very old consensus protocol, very well understood. And so that's so far so good. The problem is this kind of signature accrual scheme is limited by nature to a small number of validators.
Okay.
Ethereum has to use, they're going to divide their blockchain into multiple shards, into multiple parallel universes. And in each shard, they are currently planning to have 64 validators and a latency of 5 to 10 seconds. For one, a latency of 5 to 10 seconds is unusable on the internet. So that's a huge problem. And the second issue is that a shard with 64 validators in it is absolutely limited in what it can do. 64 validators will quickly turn into 64 members of a single cabal that I will not. I will buddy up with Anupam and my other friends, and I will keep you out, Vikas. And if I so choose to do, so, nobody can really get in my way. 64 is a small enough number that this is eminently possible. We keep seeing this in EOS. EOS has become a closed universe. It's very difficult to break into that inner circle. The same is going to happen with ETH2. Now, let me say a few more words about the sharding idea that they have. They had been planning, and I don't know what's going to ultimately happen, but they have been planning to shard and divide their universe into different chunks by essentially a random contract address. And if you do it that way, what's going to happen is you used to have a single chain on Ethereum 1. Now you divided it into 256 different shards, except everybody will grind through their contract address until they end up on the same shard as MakerDAO and DAI. There's going to be a shard with the popular kids. It's like having 256 parties all at the same time. Nobody's going to just distribute themselves evenly. You're going to go to where the popular kids are.
True.
The popular kids are on the one chart. So whatever problem you had in a one shard world, one chain world, you still have in a sharded world, except you got 255 additional problems, plus the extra problem of inter-shard communication. So ETH2O is late by many years, and it's late for a good reason. This is difficult. I've also worked on sharding protocols. I have the world's only sound sharding protocol under peer review right now. So I know how hard that problem is. It's not delayed because the Ethereum team is incapable. It's delayed because a sharded blockchain that's sound and correct is very difficult to come up with. There will be many corner cases, and most importantly, the fact that your universe is divided will be exposed to your users.
Yep.
And once that's exposed to your users, now your users are going to have to worry about which shard am I on? How do I communicate? Is this a local call? Is this a remote call, a cross-shard call? How much gas do I have to pay for one versus the other? It breaks the model. So I see much pain ahead for Ethereum. One of the interesting things we want to do, by the way, because let me just mention it very briefly, is issue a coin on top of AVA, not the AVA coin itself. The AVA coin itself supports the EVM, so you can run smart contracts on AVA. In fact, you run this exact same smart contracts. But we want to airdrop something called Ethereum to Ethereum holders. And Ethereum is AVA plus Ethereum. So that if you have some Ethereum now, you end up getting some Ethereum, and all of the contracts on the old chain continue to work. It's a friendly spoon, kind of like a fork, but it's a spoon. And that way, the Ethereum system continues to work, and Ethereum is there to serve as a, if you will, a safety net in case Ethereum 2.0 does not go as planned.
Wow. Thanks
Yeah,
a lot.
just one last question I have coming on Telegram. So when we can start buying Evercoin, and if how Indians can start buying Evercoin, and which exchanges it's going to be available on, and when?
Fantastic question. So we will have a coin list offering. In sometime in early June, there will be a big sale on CoinList. I encourage everybody to check it out. Anybody from anywhere can buy it, especially if you're overseas, the requirements are much lower. If you're an American, it's a little harder, but if you're overseas, it's a lot easier to buy the coin from CoinList. We will go mainnet in July. Barring unforeseeable circumstances, we should go mainnet in early July. And so CoinList sale in June, then mainnet in July. We are in talks with some very large exchanges. They've asked us to keep their identities and names secret, so I cannot tell you all what their names are, but we are in talks with quite a few number of exchanges and also the biggest ones. There is one thing I can make public, which is Coinbase has already listed AVA as one of the platforms that they're working with for eventual listing. So that they made that public in their own blog, so I can reveal that to the rest of the world. We're also talking to some really large exchanges.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Emin, for taking out time and coming here to speak.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you so much, and cheers to everybody in India. Take care, be safe, be
I'll
healthy.
see you backstage, please, Emin. Backstage, yeah. Thanks.
Will do.